Andrew Mehrtens, welcome to Between Two Beers.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Very excited to have you in. Big week of podcasting for you. Is this is your life Andrew Mehrtens tour?
Well, there was one like that, and it was a pretty short episode. I did something with Justin Marshall at the start of the week, which was good fun. Always good to get alongside Marshy again.
Yeah.
Especially not get into arguments like we used to when we're playing alongside one another. So it was fun to do. But this is probably the epitome, without blowing it up here, of podcasts here. So I'm chuffed to be on.
Oh, mate, dream guest for us. Wanted to ask, was it hard to secure leave for this tour? Because you're in New Zealand for a couple of weeks. Because you've just had newborn twin babies back home?
Yes, we've got 8-week-old twins, girl and boy in Paris. On top of that, I was away for 2 weeks in South Africa, watching both All Blacks games there, working at both All Blacks games there.
Stake your claim.
You know, it is stuff that I've got to do, but it's tough being that far away, and tough when you hear that, you know, how labour intensive it is, especially at the moment. So, you know, twins are a handful. They're wonderful, but you know, Shauna's doing an unbelievable job in Paris, and how she hasn't gone out of her mind yet, I don't know. So I've just got to try and keep my head down, work hard, and get back as quick as I can.
Well, you still got a few good night's sleeps ahead of you before you get back there, so enjoy them while you can.
I'm being reminded of that constantly, so yes.
I know we're going there quite early, but when you see that scan and it's twins, you're thinking about, wow, man, we've got some years ahead of us.
Yeah, well, it was even more of a shock than that, because we were convinced it wasn't a pregnancy, so we were almost worried about the fact that there might have been a benign or not, you know, a sort of a growth for Jonah. So we were actually getting a scan at the time to detect how big this fibroma or whatever they thought it was, one of the doctors thought it was, how big it was, what the process was to get it out. And then the guy doing the scan said it's a pregnancy, which was a bit, you know, I was taken aback. And then he said, there are two of them.
Oh, shit.
It's kind of like, wow, two of what?
Yeah.
Wow. So, but it's ended up, you know, awesome. It was something that we were keen to do. We weren't actively avoiding, obviously. We weren't actively pursuing either.
I know that game.
So, yeah, after a little bit of surprise, I started doing the maths, and it checked out. But, it was a blessing. So fantastic. And to have boy and girl was awesome. I mean, you know, you just want healthy. We all know that. But to have a boy and a girl was a dream come true, really.
Awesome.
Yeah, what an exciting chapter ahead. So you're currently living in France, and there was a viral clip going around I think it was on the Legend of Marty Banks Facebook page about how good your French was, and it was some French
it was French punditry, eh?
Yeah, and it was like you really lent into the French, and it kind of like put you on their radar, or people's radar, about how fluent you are. Wow, like how many languages do you speak? What is that?
Oh, look, I've got a few languages where I can say I don't speak the language. I thought that was kind of a funny thing to start learning. I always loved languages, and I did French all the way through school and university. Didn't necessarily think that I'd use it practically, but ended up playing for 6 years in France. So when you've got a base and a structure, you know, you can fill it in with day-to-day conversation, and you should be able to pick it up a bit quicker. To be fair, I think any French person who speaks to me will know straight away I'm not a French person. I'm not a native French speaker. But if you take a bit of a run up at it and you prepare in your head what you're going to say, you can sound quite legit.
Mate, you sound great. I mean, we both worked in kind of football circles down here where you had to go to Tahiti and New Caledonia and places like that. And if you're not a French speaker, it's a hard place to go to. But have you done like a long form podcast all in French?
No, yes, but there were a lot of breaks where I probably had to take a reset and stuff. Look, being there for 6 years and speaking it every day when I was playing for 3 different French clubs, you know, it brings you up pretty quickly. You know, you could go there knowing nothing and you're still going to pick up quite a bit if you're there for 6 years. So, you know, it should be okay. At the same time, I think it's a language where you're almost never really comfortable. You never really feel like you're good at it, no matter what level you're at, versus the likes of Italian, where you just start, it's a bit sing-along, it's a lot more open. The Italians all love you, even if you're butchering their language. They love you, the fact that you're trying, and so you're not as self-conscious speaking something like Italian. But no, French, it is a hardish language. I'm sure there are tougher languages. You know, I've never tried Russian or anything like that, other than I can't speak Russian, you know. That's the only thing I took on. But no, it's nice, and I think it's important in the rugby context, if you're in France as a foreigner, really looking like you're making the effort to integrate as much as possible comfortable, engage with the French culture, respect the French culture, respect their language, because they are a little bit self-conscious about English being the global language and whether French is kind of being, losing significance year on year. So, people going over there, and I always say that to players going to France, make an effort to get into the French culture, to get the best experience for yourself, but also to really show the locals that you respect their culture, you want to be a part of it, whether it's learning the local card game and stuff like that, which is sometimes the easiest way to pick up the languages in just a practical and a fun sort of a way. So we were always, trying to convince foreign players coming over to France, do that as much as you can.
Mehrts, you're our favourite type of guest because you're a household name in New Zealand, but sort of drifted out of the Kiwi spotlight a little bit and sort of been based overseas, and now you're here to sort of share your story. But what is it like coming back? Like, is New Zealand still home? Like, do you think you will locate here at a later point? And what's it like actually just being back in New Zealand for a little bit?
It's awesome. Like, I mean, I get the best of it, I think. Coming back to New Zealand, seeing probably the best of New Zealand, but living overseas and being proud of it overseas. I mean, it's been 20 years really since I lived properly in New Zealand. Jonah's from Sydney. She's got family in Sydney. Sydney's close to New Zealand, so I've got plenty of access easily. So I think for the next few years, Sydney would be more likely to be the resting spot for a while. But always with a close connection to New Zealand. I've got, 3 kids in Christchurch. My mum's in Christchurch, obviously, and family, sister and brother and all their families. So, it's still home. It'll always be home. But yeah, it's been interesting for 20 years, just, sometimes few and far between the visits back here. I think sometimes I feel like when you're overseas, you get more of a nostalgic feeling, obviously, for New Zealand than when you're living here. Obviously, that probably makes sense. But so I've had some of my more, I guess, emotional or patriotic moments well and truly overseas. I remember one moment in Brussels. This sounds good, doesn't it? I was in Brussels. But in the lead up to the 2011 World Cup, I was doing a little bit of stuff overseas with trying to encourage people to come out to the World Cup here and maybe look to do business as well. But we had a function at the New Zealand High Commission or whatever it is in Brussels. There was a kapa haka group, and they were just fantastic. And it was the most probably homesick that I'd felt. I'd only been out of New Zealand maybe 6 years, and I really felt homesick when I saw, the haka, the waiata, and our unique culture. And then when I went outside to see them, because I knew a couple of the people in the group, and I went outside to say, awesome, thank you. And they were having a karakia after the performance, and they dragged me into that. And I was like, tears starting to go. It was some of those moments overseas, I think, where you really miss New Zealand. You miss what we have here, the special stuff we have. You miss, some of the experiences or your memories of growing up as well. It's nice to feel those moments, and then it's nice to be able to come back here as well.
And I think when you do come back, it's almost the reverse of what that is, because when people see you, there must be a wave of nostalgia for them as well. Like, I'm sitting speaking from experience, like, don't see you around, obviously, but when you walk into a room, it's like, fuck, it's Andrew Mehrtens. Like, maybe I'm a sample size of one, I don't know. But,
I got it too, bro.
But you know what I mean? Like, that must be really nice as well, that it's like a familiar face back home again, and all of a sudden you're here and there's probably an outpouring of really positive emotion towards you.
Well, I guess I get the best of it because I was never clearly a big, strong, athletic, physical, intimidating character. I think I had the reputation probably, and rightly so, of being kind of the boy next door, or the normal kid who lived out a kind of a ridiculous dream playing with the All Blacks. So I think people have always felt really kind of protective for me and really familiar with me, and I love that. So. If you're walking around a supermarket and someone's like, "Hey, Meads," just walking past and stuff, that's awesome. It feels, it just feels really familiar and stuff. And I, like I say, it's different if you're a big, tough, athletic individual. But yeah, I'm hopefully just sort of not appeal to everyone, but I think everyone feels comfortable just sort of saying g'day and chatting. And so, it feels nice.
So to set the scene, it's Test week in an All Black season. You and Razor played together. There's a relationship there. Are you like texting him? Are you guys in communication?
I try not to too much. I don't want to be one of those guys who's a former guy and who always wants to seem like they're sort of clinging on to a bit of limelight with the current blokes. But I'll probably message Razor more often if there's been a loss or if there's been a difficult performance, something like that, just to show a bit of support. I mean, everyone can be your friend when you're winning and when things are going well. So they are probably the moments that I'd be more likely to message Razor. Saw him a couple of times in South Africa and was going to try and catch up with him in Cape Town, but again, just got a little bit sort of shamed about, not wanting to sort of be in his face, but would have loved to have caught up because he looked pretty broken after that Johannesburg test, and I thought the All Blacks did so well in South Africa. I was so proud to be a New Zealander over there watching those performances. They were that close, and obviously, well, always for the All Blacks, I want them to do well, but for Razor, obviously, I'd like him to have gone well, and it's been tough. And I knew he looked pretty devastated at the end of that test. Had our chances to win. It could have gone either way and it didn't go our way, and so he looked pretty devastated. So I was meaning to try and catch up with him in Cape Town, but again, just sort of thought, look, I'll leave them do their own thing. There's plenty of time to catch up when they're out of that environment. Plus, I was busy playing paddle most of the week with Justin Marshall over there as well.
It's a weird dynamic, right? Because you, on the one hand, you've got a personal relationship, and he's in a position as the All Blacks coach, but you've also got media responsibilities and punditry stuff too. So I could imagine sometimes those comms, they may be a little bit guarded as well. Like you don't let your exact feelings come out because there's maybe a little bit of fear that gets kind of trotted out in media circles.
Yeah, totally. And we always felt that in the group as well with the media. You got to be a little bit careful because the media's got their role, and within that, they don't like people sitting on the fence. I mean, I'd always probably fall on the side of being a bit of a cheerleader. But there are negatives to that too, because you don't come across as particularly being objective. If I'm always positive about the All Blacks, which I try to be because I'm a fan first and foremost of the All Blacks, but if you're always being positive, then people say, you're not really objective, So there's a little bit of that, but I think, probably I'd like to think that I'm, like I say, always trying to be positive, always trying to see things from the player's perspective. They're out there giving their absolute all. They're not trying to make mistakes or anything like that. So I think it's understanding why things happen. So I like to think there's a little bit of objectivity there. But yeah, when I see Razor, we don't really probably think about the media relationship. I think we've had enough time together where he knows I'm not going to go, trying to delve into something and get a little tidbit and go and use that. So it's still just back into our personal relationship. We spend a lot of time together. I spent a lot of time watching him making my tackles for me, which was awesome, and he loved that. And I thought, who am I to spoil his fun, So we've got a long relationship. It was, it was a little bit sad to see that it didn't work out for Razor and Leon. I know they've got a lot of respect for one another and had a lot of time together playing and whatnot. And I thought it was pretty mature of them to come out early and say, it's just, it's not working and we're going our separate ways. But at the same time, it's sad because you want to see it work out for two guys who were teammates as well. But they've both moved on. They've both got their things they're doing. And
I had to laugh on that. I saw a headline, and I'm not sure if there's any truth to it, that you said you'd messaged them both to try to get the oil of what you didn't know what had happened, but you sort of messaged them both to see what was going on. But none of them, one of them replied to you and one of them didn't.
Yeah, well, my excuse was, I do care about both of them. I spend a lot of time, want to see them both do well. And just wanted to sort of check in, say good day, hope you're well. And yeah, like I say, got one reply back pretty quickly and it didn't really give anything away. And on the other side, I was seeing typing, and then nothing came through. I was like, God damn it. So,
just a consistency check. Does Scott Robertson sign off all his texts with the razor emoji for you as well?
I think sometimes we get into a bit of a flurry, so he just sort of sends it. There's often the fist bump, which is very, very razor.
I say as well, like we're mates.
Yeah, like you're texting razor all the time.
We got one text back from him, and it was to Stephen, and it had the razor emoji on it.
Yeah. He's it's his trademark now for 25 years. So no, but he's always pretty good. I don't expect a reply back because they're busy, but he'll always come back with something. It was nice to be able to catch up with him in France last year before the World Cup. He was across there with Jane, and so we caught up for lunch, which was just nice. Same old rubbish. We're only seeing one another maybe once or twice a year, and so the old stories, the old jokes, feel fresh again.
Yeah. Right, I'm going to bring a few voices in. So the way we do it with the podcast, we like to sort of talk to some people that know you well and get some inside lines. And we got the most polite rejection reply from your mum, which I'm going to read out to you. You're very warmly gave us her number, and I said, "Can you give us some? Can we organise a chat to have a talk about Andrew? Some interesting parts of his childhood to talk about." And she said, "Hi, Steve. Thank you for your text. Great to get a message that makes sense with correct punctuation. A lovely idea, just not for me. I'm sure Andrew has enough talk in him for both of us anyway. Good luck with how it all goes. Regards, Sandra Mehrtens." Beautifully put.
Yeah.
What a response.
That's the nicest fuck you we've ever got.
With a capital F and a full stop.
Yeah. She signed all the razor emoji as well, which was weird.
Yeah, look.
Sometimes the jokes don't work.
Man.
She, look, my parents lost my father now 18 months ago, but they're the most humble, down-to-earth people I've ever known. And, I wanted to give her a chance to contribute to this as well, and particularly from the point of view that I thought she may have wanted to give a little bit of insight maybe into my father, almost as a tribute to him. But she's leaving that up to me, so I'll go and get emotional at some point, I'm sure. But look, she's always been very proud. She's just not really out there beating her chest very much, and anything that seems sort of public like that, my parents have both tended to shy away from as well. So we used to call them in the family Tom and Barbara from The Good Life, just living the simple life and enjoying their own vegetable garden, that sort of thing. And I mean that as an absolute compliment. So maybe she felt she had too much dirt on me. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let's stay here if we can. And I sort of talked to you before we started, and I know that your father's passing is recent, and like anyone, it affects you deeply. But I did ask if it was okay to talk about it, and I was hoping you could just tell us a little bit about him and the influence he had, and how he sort of shaped you and turned you into the man you are.
Well, I would love to be a lot more like the man he was. Like I say, very, very humble. I don't even know where to start on talking about Dad. He was a rugby guy not first and foremost. He was a husband first and foremost. He was a guy who was 9 years old when he lost his father. So he grew up very much almost what you might call institutionalised. He went to the boarding school at Boys High. He went to Adams House, Christchurch Boys High. He also did some time in the army. And then he got into teaching, and he was a primary school teacher all his life. So, I guess very, not regimented so much, but lived a very kind of, I guess, structured and humble life. Went through a period, obviously, in the 80s where interest rates were sky high. Teachers weren't, obviously, and still aren't, well paid for the effort they put in. He just worked really, really hard all his life. Still had huge amount of time for his firstborn, particularly, all his kids, but I guess I got the lion's share of his attention. He was a rugby guy, so, he was always involved with rugby clubs, and whether it was at school when he first came back. So that my parents went to South Africa, for a holiday, basically, and see a safari. They had friends over there who were living in Durban who said, "Come here, it's great here. There's a great rugby club called Berea Rovers. You can play rugby here, we'll get you jobs." So they went there, they stayed there 5 years. I was born, and they decided to come home for a number of reasons. So I was back in New Zealand when I was 18 months old, and Dad went straight to Tuahiwi School in North Canterbury. Tuahiwi, population maybe 20 at the time, a bit bigger now, and where Joe Moody hails from, actually, funnily enough. So he was the sole charge sort of principal and teacher at the school. So we had, typical sort of a country school. We had all ages in the one classroom, really. So we had a mixture of local farmers and a lot of Māori from the Tuahiwi village, and that's where we lived. And so he embraced the Māori culture massively. I don't know how much he had been exposed to it previously living in Rangiora, but he really got into it, and we were bilingual at the school. Everything was done in English and Māori, and sometimes I hesitate to say that because I think legit Māori will always say, "Oh, what's this fella talking about, trying to make out he grew up Māori?" But that's essentially what we were, just very rural, humble upbringing. And Dad worked really, really hard. Mum worked really, really hard. And put everything they could into their children. It wasn't we weren't affluent, but it seemed they somehow managed to, like I say, particularly for their firstborn, anything I needed, whether it was in rugby or playing tennis and stuff we sort of seemed to find it. Dad would have long days at school at Tuahiwi, and he'd come back to the schoolhouse where we lived, and I'd be outside from the age of 4, sort of with whether it was a plastic rugby ball or as it got a bit older, normal rugby ball, waiting to kick the ball for about another hour with him. Didn't do much tackling in those days, of course, or ever, but there was a lot of kicking, and he was out there kicking till it got dark as well. So
we did wonder about that, like the origins of the boot, and it's clear now after talking to you and hearing from you, you hone that craft. And it's really special time spending time with your old man. It's pretty, it's easy to see.
I just remembered, being out there trying to kick it as high as you could and catch it at the same time. And he'd get in and he'd be able to kick it a lot higher, obviously, and I'd try and catch it. And it was just time out there with Dad. And I can, still remember it pretty vividly. And then, I guess he was immensely proud when my rugby career developed. But I still sort of look back on that and think, well, it was awesome. I mean, I wouldn't change what I was lucky enough to do, but there were a lot of times maybe when I was away, and maybe now you look back without Dad and think that there's time that I missed with him, with the rest of my family as well, and it's time you don't get back.
Death will have a way of making you look back at the what-ifs, right, in a reflective sort of spiral. But where are you at with it now?
Well, I mean, we were lucky. A lot of people lose their parents much earlier than 78, which Dad was. Would have been his 80th birthday yesterday. I still feel like particularly Mum's been cheated, but that's going to be a feeling, I think, anyway. They're both very fit people and very active people, much more active than I think I could ever be. So it just feels like it was taken too soon. But again, like I say, a lot of people will lose parents earlier than 78, so we've got to be thankful we had them that long. But it's a big hole.
Yeah, you're speaking directly to me there, because I had a very similar situation. So there was an age gap between my father and my mum, and hearing you say, I feel like Mum's been cheated out of it. For us, it's now 10 years. 12, oh God, I've lost count, 12 years since the old man passed away. And I can imagine, without knowing the story, that they were very, very close. Very, very close. And those feelings that you're feeling are very, very normal as someone who's been through that. And I can feel the love that you've got for your mum in this situation. It's really strong. And I think it's fantastic that you're able to come back, and you've built a lifestyle that allows you to come back and spend that time with her as well. And not replace, but provide some of that support that she would have had through your old man as well.
Yeah, and look, I'm far from the first or last to lose a parent, so it's just I don't think I ever want to lose the sadness. I don't think we ever want to feel like we've gone past them, So anyway, just taking that time to remember and whatever, and support Mum as much as we can. And I guess the sad thing for me is they both in that teaching business worked so hard all their lives, and had to be frugal at times and save and very careful about money. And I'm so proud of the point they got to, and I contrast it with what I was having when I was, in my 20s and playing with the All Blacks and on big contracts, and money was easy come, easy go. And I look at what they did over the course of a lifetime, supporting their 3 children, but also building their wealth in a way, and getting to the point where they were actually building their own house. They'd owned a house in Christchurch for the best part of 23 years. They'd sold that and were building kind of their house. And unfortunately, my father passed away. Dad died before they were actually moved into it, which is horrifically sad. But, I'm proud of Mum being in there. It's nice for me to come back and stay with her there. There's plenty of stuff around of Dad, plenty of good memories. Like I say, we were lucky to have 78 years, really. I imagine with some of the stress that he would have had on, like a lot of people in their lives, it could have been earlier, and his father died at the age of 48. So I remember Dad being a bit nervous when he got to that point and sort of going past that. And so, it could have been worse. But it's sad, but like I say, I'm not the first and far from the last.
You still feel what you feel though, and I love that. I love that wanting to make sure that feeling is always there, because it's important. It's important to acknowledge.
Some of my favourite memories, I think, in the last few years have been when I have been working on broadcast here and fly into Christchurch for the weekend, and it'd be an evening flight from Australia. You come in and land at about midnight in Christchurch, or 12:30, 1 o'clock, and Dad's out there to pick me up, which was awesome. Some of my favourite moments with him, just being out there late at night, picking me up and getting the drive home and a bit of a chat and stuff. And so I miss that. And coming in, I'll always think of that.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I am going to take us in a slightly different direction, but we're going to link back up to your childhood where we'll bring him in again. But I'm sort of in the process of painting a picture of Mehrts, and I spoke to your good childhood friend Andrew McNee, and he was very generous with his time and his words about you. And I'm going to actually read out what he's written. Mehrts was exceptionally good at sport, literally anything he put his hand to. He's a scratch golfer, he's probably a better tennis player than anything else, and obviously he's a very good footy player. But in terms of his personality, he doesn't like talking about himself. He's pretty self-deprecating, even back in the day. When he was starting to do some pretty cool things, like when he started to play for Canterbury and then the Crusaders, when you catch up with him, he just would never talk about it. He'd always want to talk about what you're up to, and even when you tried to pin him down, he just wouldn't even talk about it. He's very generous with his time and his support of other people, but he hates talking about himself. He's a funny cat. Now, it's almost bizarre that he even did what he did. You'll meet him and he just doesn't really talk about it. There is more, but I'm just going to pause here. That's you, right? Like you are more. Your natural state is inquisitively asking and deflecting and talking about other people's lives. I know this is a very unique situation where it's literally 2 hours about your life, but is that accurate?
I guess I've never really been comfortable feeling like I'm beating my chest. Doesn't mean I'm not tremendously proud of what I've been able to achieve, but I think in that rugby environment you kind of learn to, I don't know what the right word is, relativize that or whatever, and just look at it very matter-of-factly. I got opportunities that I was lucky to get. You had to be good enough to take them to get into teams or whatever it was. So look, I'm proud of the experiences I was able to have and teams I was able to get into, etc. But I'm not really massively comfortable on beating my chest about it. I'd much rather, and I like taking the mickey out of people, so I'd much rather start with myself by doing that. And of course, I get to do a few speeches or, after dinner speeches and lunch appearances and stuff like that. And, there are all manner of people who turn up and tell you how good they are and how to be successful and stuff like that. And I prefer to go a little bit niche on that and turn up and be, the loser, or have a bit of a laugh at yourself and be a bit more normal. It's easy to do that when you're in my position, where Grant Fox before me won a World Cup and Dan Carter after me, best player in history, and won 2 World Cups, So I've got a lot of material there. So, I guess I've never been. Look, I think somewhere definitely inside me there's cockiness and there's arrogance, and I think particularly if you're a first 5'8", you've got to have that. So somewhere there is. I just probably don't really let it out all that much, and I'd much rather. I wouldn't say it's a fake persona coming out, but I'm more comfortable having a bit of a laugh at myself and whatnot.
Yeah, McNee continues, and this is going to contrast.
I bet he does.
He always had a bowl cut. He was hopeless with chicks, no chat, and he was the only All Black that was a virgin. He also talked about how you run like a dinosaur, but were deceptively fast, and he wanted us to show you this.
That's cheap. That is cheap and childish to immature.
So for those listening at home, what I've done is I've put my finger and my thumb together to make a circle, and it's a silly game that we used to play too at school, where if you make someone look at it, you get to give them a couple of punches, right? And he said, and this is like such a good characterization of Mehrts, super intelligent, very quick, but he loved this silly game, and he would play it all through childhood, all through All Blacks, and I think it culminated in a front page spread. Yeah.
The crazy thing is you've got that platform where you're on TV or you're in the paper with a photo, and you know your catchment area for the little circle game is huge. So and he's right. You know, I wasn't. I'm still not good on the whole. You know, I'm not a sort of a smooth kind of a picking up sort of a guy. I was painfully self-conscious as a teenager. Had a couple of incidents probably that led to that at school but I was just naturally self-conscious. I don't know, and it makes me kind of aware of other people who are, I guess, you know, because particularly in rugby you see this confident persona, you see someone doing interviews and whatnot, and you really get an idea of them as that sort of a confident person. And there are so many different personalities in any walk of life, but particularly when you see, you know, rugby players or sports people get interviewed, and I know that there's a lot going on behind that there's the sports persona and then there's the real persona. So yeah, I wouldn't say he could be throwing stones there on that count, by the way. But
are you still playing the circle game in your 50s?
No, only with
now it's back.
I've got to say I'm pretty childish. I'm one for repetition as well.
Well, that's the best thing about friendships, right? Is the gags are 30 years old and they just get trotted out and trotted out and trotted out.
Yeah, and the leniency as well. You know, we sort of accept it from mates. So yeah, still doing a lot of immature stuff. I always wondered, do I even look like I'm a 50s sort of a male now and being so childish? But I think, you know, you want to have fun. And yeah, but no, I was, you know, the bowl cut, maybe not even a bowl. I can't even remember how it got cut, but I think I remember maybe a couple of times at home in Tuahi, we would have been maybe mum with the dressmaking scissors just going around and just shorten, and I didn't give a damn, you know. So I think maybe that was what drove a lot of self-consciousness when I came in eventually to town, to Christchurch, and was at Christchurch Boys High or Heaton Intermediate before then. And I was a country bumpkin. No real concept of, I mean, my whole life was sport, whether it was tennis or whether it was rugby. No real concept of kind of social or moving into that area of boys and girls, that sort of thing. And I think we had I know we had a mufti day one time at Boys High, and I wore what I thought, you know, was good to wear.
Those are brutal days. Those are brutal days.
I can only imagine them these days, like even worse. But I wore a pair of Canterbury zippies, you know, the Canterbury with the zips down the bottom, and I think not the dryzer bone, but what were the checked.
Like a swan dry?
A swan dry, the swanee.
Yeah.
So that was what I wore and got roundly, not abused, but ridiculed by my year at Boys High. And straight away then I think it was probably brewing to be, you know, self-conscious coming along, but bang, for the next few years I thought everybody was looking at me when I'd be walking down the street, not for anything special, but that people would be judging me, looking at what I wore, laughing at me. So it was But
at the same time, and this is told to us secondhand, 15-16 Mehrts is getting a bit of a reputation as being a very good footy player, someone that can, you know, convert or nail penalties from halfway, even at those tender years. So you're running sort of two parallel operations where, I guess, by your own accounts, you're feeling quite self-conscious, as most teenage boys are growing up, but you're also building this kind of profile as an up-and-coming athlete.
Yeah, well, I guess that being on the field was kind of my vehicle, that I was comfortable in that environment. I liked it. I mean, physically, obviously, I was never imposing, maybe not physically comfortable, but comfortable on the field, that I was quick, AKA scared, and could pass, and I knew I could kick. I mean, I'd just been kicking all my life and had good timing. There was probably a little bit of nature, a little bit of nurture there. I wouldn't say I was a diligent practicer when it came to practicing later on in my career, but early on, when I was young, just when we were living in Kaiapoi, we would move from Tuahiwi to the big smoke of Kaiapoi, and we were just down the road from the rugby club. So, you know, it'd be very easy just to race out there after school, go down and kick and try and get further back. And I remember when I first got a place kick from the 22, and then after that, you know, the next milestone was sort of the 10 metre and then the halfway and stuff. So I knew I could kick the ball. I didn't think for a minute that it would lead to anything greater than just playing rugby all my life, being proud of playing for my club. I mean, you know what Cantabrians are like. Canterbury's kind of the pinnacle, above the All Blacks. So playing for Canterbury was my absolute dream in life. And so, I didn't, but I was just enjoying, kicking the ball.
What was it?
Well, I was going to go niche areas because I know you're going to follow up with this, but niche, how much forceback are you playing as a kid?
Yeah, that was probably with 2 or 3 of us per team down at the Kaiapoi rugby grounds. So yeah, plenty. And yeah, I guess I could just strike it. I don't know if it helped being a tennis player with the timing and whatnot, but I was never playing golf when I was younger, but just found, I guess, eventually when I played golf, I wasn't a scratch golfer, I was a scratchy golfer, but I always had pretty good timing and connect. And so I don't know if that was just, from the time spent with Dad kicking and sort of honing, or whether some of it was natural ability, I don't know, or a combination.
Yeah, that was my question, and it's kind of diving right into the specifics of it, because lots of kids around New Zealand practice their kicking, right? But you became one of the very best we've ever produced. So is it the power you had? You weren't a particularly powerful kid. Is it technique? Is it just the amount of work you put into it? Like, if you had to hone it down to why you became such a good kicker, do you think about what that was?
I think it was probably timing, and I had a disproportionately powerful kick for the size of my body, really, and I think that was just timing. And I think a lot of it was to do with just in the early days accelerating into the kick, and I think that's the most important thing, is that you're accelerating through the kick. No matter what biomechanics say now about how to kick best or whatever, ultimately you want to be accelerating through the kick, I believe. And I think maybe tennis did play a part in that, because it's all timing. You've got a ball coming at you at different speeds, different times, and just getting yourself in position and accelerating through the tennis shot as well. Same sort of thing. So I guess my timing was always pretty good with the kicking, but I didn't really think about it too much.
I guess you just good at it, right?
You just can do it. And,
force back. I'm telling you, it's force back. Hours and hours of force back.
Yeah, well, that's timing too, because you get the ball, you haven't caught it, but they're scrabbling to get back into position. You suddenly got to snap one out and hit it well. So, I mean, some people do that naturally with tackling. You know what I mean? I'd look at a Richie McCaw and look at his natural tackling ability. Anything moving near him without thinking, bang, he's no conscious thought process. He just knocks them over. I never had that. So similar sort of thing. Or Norm Maxwell, how he could hit into the tackle and really hit like he was twice as big as what he was. And he tried to work with me at times on tackling as well, because I was desperate to get any kind of help from anyone I could to get better. And he was, it was just when he tried to explain it to me how I could get better, just seeing how he saw the tackle and throwing his shoulder into it, it was just, natural for him.
Yeah.
And not for me ever, unfortunately.
So sort of moving you through, there's a period we want to talk about when you went to Italy, age 19. Right? Because you're this sort of, I don't want to say scrawny, but a slimmer built kid, and you're going overseas by yourself for the first time. And what was that experience like? It
was awesome. So, again, I wasn't at that stage having much in the way of aspirations for much higher honours. I'd managed to play for Canterbury that year. Was delighted. Like, we had my debut was down in Ashburton against Mid Canterbury. We had a dream game, really. I was just looking to fit in, not make an ass of myself, try and get the ball to everyone else. I think Kelly Hansen or Dion Kerr might have been outside me at 12. I was trying to get the ball to those guys. The first 5 times I got the ball, the defence, not seeing me as any kind of threat, ran off onto everyone else, and I had these massive gaps, and I ended up running. And I remember worrying, thinking, okay, I've made 5 breaks in the first 15 minutes. Is everyone going to think I'm just greedy? Yeah. Just, there for himself, his debut. So we had a big win there. So I just played for Canterbury that year, which to me was going to be the pinnacle. No greater designs really on anything else. I'd played New Zealand under-19s, which again, probably nationally, I thought was a pinnacle. Played alongside Justin Marshall, had a good win over Australia down in Dunedin, had a good night out. I thought that was the pinnacle. And so, got to the end of the season. A mate of mine, Dean McKinnell, who's still living in Italy, had played there previously. He was setting someone up to go every year. They could take 1 or maybe 2 foreigners. Sent me across there. He said, look, I think it was they were paying under the table then, something like $1,500 a month. I was there for 6 months. I thought I got a student loan. I worked it out. They're providing you with an apartment and stuff like that. It was a dream, and it was just a chance to go to somewhere else in the world and have a great rugby experience. In those days, you could do that and come back and still miss none of the New Zealand season. So off I went, and if I was 75 or 76 kilograms there, I probably came back 3 or 4 kilograms lighter. You'd think going to Italy with all the pasta, you might get heavier. But what happened was I would only probably eat 4 nights a week. Twice at training, we'd eat after night training. We'd eat at the club. The game night, we'd have a feed on the way back from the game or at our stadium. And I went out with friends on a Saturday night for pizza. Other than that, I couldn't cook, so I was stuck at home for the other 3 nights of the week, not really eating any dinner, waiting up till midnight just to see ESPN, which was the only English channel they had on TV, would come on. The English language would come on at midnight, and Italian was fun to learn after having learnt French. So I picked that up pretty quickly, given that nobody spoke English in the town. But it was unbelievable. Like, it was surreal. The first weekend I got there, I'd spent 30 odd hours traveling, Christchurch to Auckland to Sydney to Singapore to Rome to Milan, picked up at Milan for a 2-hour drive to Calvisano, little old Calvisano. So I'm hallucinating as it was from travel. And about 2 days later, I had to jump on a bus, and we did a 9-hour bus trip down to inland from Rome and Napoli, down the south of Italy or down the middle. And we played at a town called Benevento. And after all this travel during the week, then this big bus trip, I've woken up on the Sunday morning for the game with church bells ringing. I've looked out the window, and it's just this really sort of stereotypical Italian village scene with cobbled streets and, like I say, the bells going. And I'm properly pinching myself, like, just this, where the hell am I? What the hell am I doing? I'd been told that as a foreigner in Italy, you've got to score the points. So even if you lose by 100 points to 3, make sure you get to 3. Yeah. And so my first touch of the ball in Italy, I was playing at fullback. I decided to go for a drop goal, which went along the ground, way to the left, actually probably found touch. I was out near the sideline. I think it found touch from a grubber kick. So it was an unmitigated disaster. But it was a wonderful 6 months that I had there in Calvisano, and still, pretty dear to me, that the people there.
Thinking back, sorry, how foundational is that in terms of building your confidence? Because you've spoken about being maybe a nervous teenager. You're on the other side of the world, having to learn a language, having to support yourself. Does that set you up for future Mehrts experiences?
I guess if I'd improved markedly doing that, yes, it probably would have. It was a good experience. You're right to be a bit more self-sufficient and independent. I couldn't say I was good at it. I wasn't good at cooking. The boys used to take turns, because all these Italian boys can cook, their local dish. They might come from somewhere else in northern Italy. They'd come around at lunchtime and maybe cook up their local, specialty, which was awesome. I never really took the time to sit and watch and listen and learn how to do it myself. But it was interesting that I wouldn't say the place stayed clean. I remember having to go through the house and go upstairs to the bedroom and get into bed and sit there on the edge of the bed wiping my feet, so all the dust and rubbish came off it, so I didn't drag it into bed. So I wasn't diligent with the housework. I could have been a lot better, but it was pretty cool.
You mentioned a pinch me moment there, and there's a lot to come. But Andrew told a story of when you're back in New Zealand and you were sort of walking home with him one day from club footy or something, and he was asking you, like, did you think you'll make the All Blacks, or when do you make the All Blacks? And you're like, oh yeah, I think maybe it's coming, but it'll be, months or years away. And then you were named in the All Blacks the next day.
Yeah, well, I still probably would have been thinking, most of me thinking, yeah, look, I think the closer I got to the All Blacks, the more it felt that it was unachievable, the further away it felt. I was really lucky in how I got into the All Blacks in 95, because I'd been, I guess, good enough to make the broader training squad throughout the summer because of the World Cup coming up. So we had maybe 40 of us, and but then the series of games at the start of 95 where the selectors needed to see all the players in the 40 needed to play rugby in front of the selectors, and I got injured playing against, I think it was Orange Free State for Canterbury. I took the kick off down in my 22. This huge, big, tall Free State forward ran through. His knee was at the same height as about my hip, and it just took out my hip, and I got a dead leg, basically just a bruise. And it put me out for 6 weeks. That's how low my pain threshold was. So I was out for 6 weeks. In that period, I missed a lot of these games where they were trying to see all these the All Black squad members play. So I missed out on playing South Island versus North Island. And South Island took, I think, a 40 or 50 point hiding, where I would have been on the back foot all day, would have looked awful. The first All Black trial, which was possibles, probables, I would have been in the possibles team. They took a hiding, and again, I would have looked awful. There are another 2 games maybe that I missed out on, and finally they ran out of games, and they were like, well, we've got to give this guy a chance to be seen. And the one game that was left was basically a shadow All Blacks team called the Harlequins playing in Hamilton against the Waikato development side. So I'm playing alongside Zinzan Brook and Graham Bashop and Fitzy and all that lot against, Waikato hopefuls, under 23s mostly, and we won by almost 100 points. And of course, I look wonderful on the front foot. So that was basically the basis for getting in the team. I genuinely was sitting there when Laurie Mains named the team, and I was kind of thinking, you know what, it's actually I am almost there. Like the something I never would have believed actually feels quite close now. And I was hoping to get a spot on the bench, and then he said number 10. And he read my name out, and just in this really inauspicious surrounds in a little motor inn in Hamilton, where we were staying on that, that stretch leaving Hamilton where all the motor inns are. And suddenly, firstly, I'm thinking, well, this is a little incongruous with what I thought an All Black naming might be.
We didn't have nice hotels back then. Like I know, 95 Hamilton was, it was motor inns.
You've seen this suit and tie of the, a New Zealand Rugby Union councillor or president or whatever announcing the team, and this was just in this sort of team room upstairs, and Laurie Mains reading it out quite matter-of-factly. Bang, next thing I'm in, I've got everyone coming over, shaking my hand at the end of it, and I just couldn't wait to actually jump on the phone and call my father. So it just all of a sudden happened. So I probably would have been a little bit genuine with Andy, telling him, it's a long way off. But it also was kind of the feeling that I had the closer I got to the All Blacks as I went through Canterbury for a couple of seasons. We won the Ramphilly Shield. Thought I'd point that out in '94, of course. But that was really the start of it for a lot of us at Canterbury, the start of really things happening for us. But even so, the closer I'd got to potentially being talked out in the All Black frame, the further away it seemed.
So you're in the All Blacks, and then you're at the '95 World Cup. And I know that you do a lot of speaking and a lot of sort of Q&As, and your career itself is legendary, but you also played with legends. I imagine every time you speak, you must get asked about a Jonah story. Like you must have about 5 or 6 you can recycle. So I'm not going to ask you for all of them, but I would like to hear a couple of your best.
Well, you want to try and be entertaining here or funny. I'm not sure I'm either in this context either. Jonah was it was just ridiculous. For me, I'd grown up, all my rugby down in the South Island had been mostly kind of white, playing against maybe farmers who are the tough forwards and stuff like that. And my first experience of playing North Island teams was when we came to an under-15 tournament in Wellington. And we were little old boys high, and we turned up and watched these big teams come in and for the opening sort of ceremony. And I remember seeing St. Tipene came in, Teote was there as well, and those guys came walking in, basically this is under 15s, they had moustaches, they may as well have had girlfriends pushing prams in the background. They walked in they had black pointy shoes on with white socks under trousers. They looked like a Motown group, and we are just looking at one, and they're huge. We were just looking at one another going, what the hell is going on here? So that was, first experience really from a little white Christchurch boy. But then when you get into that sort of rugby at that level, and you see the size of players, whether they're Maori or Polynesian, and everyone's just bigger and more physical. But then Jonah was absolutely next level, and it was frightening to see. And I remember being at trainings where got into the All Blacks, and I'm thinking, wow, this is exciting, this is awesome. And they're like, yeah, we do this hitting into the pads off the four corners, sort of a grid, and you take one step and smash into the pad and then pass it across to the next corner. I remember being excited about this and seeing Richard Lowe and Sean Fitzpatrick at different times throughout this training session. Only one step from the corner marker where they started off, and Jonah would take one step, whack, Richard Lowe went flying. Proper big, huge unit went flying, head over heels backwards 3-4 metres. And I thought, ooh, did I really see that? It was out of the corner of my eye. Maybe he just got him a little bit off balance. Then I saw him do it to Fitzy as well. Fitzy goes flying back into the middle of the scrum. I'm going, this is next level stuff. Jonah was just phenomenal. I couldn't reconcile how he was so big and strong and then so softly spoken. You know, so soft, so gentle off the field, hunched over, but then suddenly put on a jersey and he's beside you. And, you know, my first couple of outings were thankfully alongside him. If I'd been playing at 10 and he's coming off the back of a scrum at 8, you know, like, see you later, that's career over.
Yeah.
Done. Voluntarily.
Yeah.
But
how did you stack up with him in the speed drills? Like if you actually did 40-yard or 100, did you do 100 metres?
Speed drills, I was still pretty scared, so I was still pretty fast. He was something else, though, to see someone that size shift. You know, if you'd done your run and you were walking back from the 40 metres and he was coming through as the next runner, you know, he just about knocked a guy like me over just with the wind that was coming through with him. I was more confident in the 3 kilometre time trial.
Yeah.
Never Jonah's favourite. We only realised subsequently, a lot of us, because I think the medical staff and maybe a couple of select players, perhaps Fitzy, knew about Jonah's condition. The rest of us were pretty much in the dark about it, which is the way things were handled then. And so I feel a little bit guilty, some of us from back in the day, maybe not laughing so much at Jonah, but it was, you know, just one of the things he wasn't so great at, the 3 kilometre time trial. I remember thinking, if you put the ball in his hands and asked him to run 100 metres 30 times, he'd be able to do that. But 3K just plodding around a track wasn't Jonah. Now, of course, subsequently you realise for a lot of that time doing those speed tests or doing the fitness test, he was probably carrying a huge amount of weight. He's probably on goodness knows what concoction of drugs. So the fact that he even operated was incredible. But his weakness really in anything, I mean, he's good in the gym, obviously, good on the speed test, but the 3K was his Achilles heel. And I remember times where we were doing that at the start of the season, and you'd see huge big guys like Craig Dowd or Ollo Brown finish their 3K in maybe 12 minutes or whatever, and go out, and they would, after doing their 3K, try and help pace Jonah around a couple of laps, you know, as he was sort of dragging it in after 17 minutes. So, like I say, that was that we took solace from the fact that he wasn't good at everything. But he was just a beast, just amazing presence to be alongside in the team, especially for a little guy like me.
What's the electricity like when Jonah meets Nelson Mandela?
Well, it was pretty obvious that Mandela was kind of a fan, you know, like he stopped and really, I mean, he knew about him. If you could ask, because he was only pretty recent to rugby, understandably, with Nelson Mandela, and I think, you know, remembering that Jonah was the one guy in the team that, firstly, I think Nelson Mandela recognised and knew about, but also possibly identified with, just because of the ethnicity and stuff like that. And I think for Nelson Mandela, who clearly, you know, we didn't know the story behind it at the time, but clearly came out with a really global kind of view and a really, you know, an attitude of reconciliation and you know, progression. And he saw Jonah as a big part of that, and he saw Jonah as someone even in the opposition who would be able to inspire South Africans. So the amount of respect that you saw from Nelson Mandela when he met Jonah was palpable, really. You almost expected him to ask for his autograph, you know.
Well, what about for you? 21 World Cup, thousands of people in the stadium, millions watching home. You're meeting Nelson Mandela and then competing in this huge event. Like, what was going in your head?
After the plane's flown over the stadium. And
it was surreal. Like, the whole thing was surreal. I mean, I'd gone from not even anticipating being in the All Blacks several months previously to playing in the game against Canada at Eden Park, where everything kind of went as well as it could possibly go. You know, I got a pass from Jeff Wilson, managed to skid over the line for a try in my first test. Next thing, we're in South Africa. The team's playing exhilarating rugby, sweeping kind of all before us. we had a week off. We got taken up on helicopters to Mozambique, where we're flying through on basically army helicopters with no doors and just basically hanging out the side, almost like we could have had a gun as guerrilla warfare sort of thing. And we're flying and you're almost falling out of the plane into the river below, and I'm just genuinely pinching myself again, going, what the hell is going on here? And then you get to the final. I stayed out. I tended to stay out as long as I possibly could. I wasn't. Firstly, I wanted to stay away from guys who were more serious in their preparation in the changing room, and didn't want to, because if I was starting to feel self-conscious or nervous or whatever, I'd start not being a smart ass, but trying to add a bit of levity just for myself. And I didn't want to do that alongside guys who have a more serious preparation. So I would stay out in the field much longer. So I was out there long enough to see the plane come over. And that was a huge moment. And like I say, it was just continued the surreal nature of this whole tournament for me and this whole period. And then I knew when we're standing out on the field lined up that we're going to be meeting one of the iconic figures of humanity, of human history. And at the time I'm genuinely trying to reconcile it with, I think we'd won the toss, so we had the kickoff, and I'm nervous about the kickoff because you got to get it. I want to get it close, but I need to get it 10 meters. Otherwise, if it's not 10 meters, I think we might have been going to kick the wrong way or something like that. So I had it all in my head, make sure it gets 10 meters. So I've got this really mundane thought of my next job on the field was going to be kickoff, get that right, mixed with, wow, I'm meeting this unbelievable figure of human history, and I'm going to remember this. I know I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life as an amazing moment. But, 30 seconds time, once we've done the haka, I've got to do the kickoff and get that right.
Because contextually, have you been playing club footy that same year, that same season?
May not have before the test, but funnily enough, after the final, I went back and played for Old Boys 8 days later. Within the space of 8 days, I managed to play for the All Blacks. I played for Canterbury. I think we played Nelson Bays in a Shield challenge. We still had the Shield before Auckland stole our Shield off us at the end of 95. And then on the Sunday, I only came on a reserve for Canterbury, but on the Sunday, managed to play for Old Boys against Burnside down at Burnside Park. So within 8 days. So it was, a completely surreal time. And it was almost like, I was devastated, obviously, with the final result, as everyone was, the country, the team. It was horrific. But I think it was probably good for me to get back and almost get back to normality and be able to play that game with high school Old Boys 8 days after the World Cup final, to just get back to, like I say, some form of normality and something I recognised a bit better.
In our research, we'd heard that part of your pre-game ritual, whatever, was vomiting. Like you would throw up before games. Is that?
No, there was. I wasn't that nervous. Josh might have. No, somebody I remember did.
You had a different.
I had.
You had a very different pre-match.
I've laughed about. I've laughed about that for years. It came about in a bit of a sort of a half inebriated rugby talk that we did on stage, and I made a joke alluding to the fact I might have self-pleasured before matches. Which,
who hasn't?
Well, everybody's a little bit. What do you call it when you've got routine? There's very little difference between routine and what's the word? God, I've had a blank. Where it's like more than routine, you've got to do it, otherwise it's bad luck for you.
Habit. Process.
Chronic masturbation.
That's what I was looking for.
No, you're very, very. God, it'll come to me.
And look, fastidious.
There had been a time. No, it's more. It's less methodical than that. But there had been a time playing in New Zealand Colts trials where I'd found myself alone. My roommate was out. Just enjoyed a bit of alone time, and then realised, oh my God, our trial match is 40 minutes away. So I basically threw my gear on, went straight out into the fields at Porirua to play this trial game with New Zealand Colts, and had a blinder. And so you go, wow, okay, so it works then. So you know what, I'm gonna, they all talk about finding the routine that works for you. And I thought, gee, I'm going to have to keep this up. But no, it wasn't the case right throughout my career. I liked having a laugh about it. But
Mark Stafford is still rolling that story out in his keynote. So he threw under the bus the Hamilton boys.
He's convinced there. When you said throw up, I thought,
no. I was
euphemism.
I was getting there. The whole Suzie thing, you were the first to go down. And then, I mean, it's been, I don't know what the word is, but everyone's got their version of Suzie. What's your retelling of it?
Actually, sorry, I just thought of something on that last story as well, because it's obviously done the rounds in terms of your pre-match preparation and stuff. And so I ended up going along to the All Blacks Club Week that they club night that they have on a Tuesday night in Sydney a couple of years back. And Ryan Crotty was there to sort of welcome me, and I had a bit of a connection with Crotts because he'd been a ball boy one time with Crusaders and gave him socks and stuff like that. And always been a fantastic guy. And so he was the one sort of introduced me into the All Blacks, and they have a question and answer. And two things that came out of that I worked out, that they were asking me a lot about losing the Bledisloe Cup to the Wallabies. And I realised eventually that we've got a couple of generations who've never lost the Bledisloe. And so they were using me as what's it like to be a loser against the Australians. So that was my contribution. But also they asked me about that, the pre-match routine and stuff like that. So we've had a bit of a laugh, but and hammed it up a little bit, etc. And I've gone to dinner and sat there, in front of, say, Kieran Reid or Aaron Smith sitting there. I'm thinking, have I really just talked to the most successful All Black team in history about masturbation before a game? Really? So anyway.
Depending on the crowd, you can tailor that.
Spread far and wide. Look, the stuff in South Africa, a huge proportion of the team got sick pretty violently ill on the Thursday night. I was the first to go down, so I didn't realise it was happening with everyone else. I'd gone to the stadium. I'd gone down to Ellis Park to do some goal kicking. I'm sure we'd had a day off, and all we had the next day was the captain's run, which was just pretty low intensity. And I got back in 6 o'clock at night. I'm in the foyer of the hotel because my father had played in Natal and mum and dad had lived in South Africa. They knew a lot of people there. Some had come up from Durban for the game. So I was supposed to meet a couple of people in the foyer, said g'day to them, started feeling really ill, had to excuse myself and ran into the bathroom in the ground floor of the hotel and just started heaving. And I remember thinking that it appeared to me to be really bright yellow. And I sort of thought, well, this is not a good sign. It doesn't look particularly normal. So had to excuse myself, went straight to see Doc Mike Bowen, as they do when they don't want anything to rip through the team, be passed to one another. I got isolated straight away. So I got put in my own room. I'd been rooming with Graham Basham, I think. Next thing I'm in my own room.
Started masturbating.
Immediately. Felt a little better for a while. And got given a Petri dish and for the whole night was up. Both ends all three ends going, but never felt up to taking a sample. I always thought, there'll be time. I'll do it the next time. So, got through the night, vomiting and diarrhea and stuff, and the next morning felt a little bit better. Went down to our team meeting at 10 o'clock, having no idea what had gone on with anyone else, and got there and it was just carnage. There were guys in the team room lying on the floor, some up on the physio tables and things like that. It was obvious, something wasn't quite right. And I started getting the stories from guys. A few of them had gone to the movies the night before. Richard Lowe had raced out of the movie and heaved into a big flower pot or something in this mall. So a big tough guy like that. And Colin Meads hadn't, I don't think, been able to get out of bed on that Friday morning. So I kind of thought, well, if it's the same thing that's knocked me down, then I feel a little bit better. If it's knocked down Pinetree, what chance did I have? So instead of going to the ground, we would have normally gone to Ellis Park and maybe look around at what we might do in this part of the field, that part of the field. Maybe the goal kickers have a few kicks. In the end, we just jumped on the bus and went to a nearby park. Most of the guys just got off and went and lay down. And, there was some chat during the day of, do we say anything about it? I think everyone was just in self-preservation mode anyway, just trying to get to feel better, taking liquids on, getting hydrolytes or whatever, trying to get a bit more food in the system and re-strengthen. So everything that was being looked after by management was sort of their concern. At one point they said, look, there's a question as to whether we ask for a delay in the final, but we don't want to do that because we doubt it will get rescheduled, and we don't want to give the South Africans the idea that we might not be, full colour. So in the end, we just sort of went through with it, and realistically, and I have to say this because otherwise it sounds like sour grapes. We were a really, really fit team. On the Saturday, we were feeling pretty much right. We got through to extra time, obviously. I will never say that I feel that we lost that game because of what happened on the Thursday night. Like I say, we're a fit team. We lost the final because we came up against a team that we couldn't run through and run around like we had with every other team. And they were fit as well. They'd put a lot of emphasis on fitness as well. When we won the semi-final against England, we Jonah, obviously 4 tries helps, but we did run them ragged. We weren't able to do that with South Africa. They were fit and they were physically strong as well, and they just kept knocking us over. And I guess we had that quandary in the game of, do we try and change our game and go with a bit more of a conservative game plan and play a game that we're not used to playing, that maybe we're not necessarily as comfortable with? This is the game that's been working for us. So do we change the game plan, or do we continue with what's worked for us well and just try to make sure we have better execution? And so we kept trying to swing because it was our game and it was what had worked well for us. We also felt that maybe being more conservative and just trying to play territory all the time may not work against the South Africans. Every time we got down their end, it seemed that they threw the ball back to Andre Joubert, the fullback. He had no angle to work with, and suddenly I've seen this massive left foot spiral get ripped past and look over, and with no angle to work with, he's managed to put it out on our 10-metre line. So they had a really good kicking game, with Stransky as well, and we just, we thought our best chance was to keep trying to play our game. So, but like I say, I'll never say that, our preparation lost us the game. We were in the game, we were ahead in extra time, first period of extra time, we went up 12-9. We missed drop goals. I missed drop goals in the regular 80 minutes, any one of which might have changed the course of history for us.
I know you get asked about that a lot, but your memory and recall is incredible, right? The detail that you've got on hand about what happened, and 30 years ago, still talking about the same thing.
I'll probably remember 30 years ago better than I can remember last week. Yeah. So, but there were just certain moments that stood out to me. I can't remember much in the way of detail of the game, but I just, a couple of those things stood out to me. Joubert rips another punt over our heads, and I'm like, far out. What have we got to do to keep these guys down the end and put more pressure on? I remember the time we were about to break out and Jonah got a pass and it got called back for a forward pass. That happens. A bit of a shame. We could have done with that one, but them's the breaks. And
you mentioned Pinetree there, and I'm keen to talk a little bit about like the court sessions and the off-field stuff, because I'd heard he had a nickname for you. Was it the Wart?
Yeah, the Wart.
And there was a game in particular called Next, I think it was, where you're sitting next to Pinetree.
Yeah, so that final led to probably the longest court session I've been in. I've been in a few through club rugby and provincial rugby and whatnot, but Pinetree was awesome. Again, probably because I wasn't a physical threat to him, that he almost felt protective of me, So I think he had a bit of a fondness for me. He was awesome. I was a cheeky little prick, but I'd bounce up to him, because we all just called him Tree. This was a thrill for me. I was an absolute student of rugby history, so I loved All Black rugby history. And so just to be in the team when you've got Pinetree as a manager and Brian Lahore as campaign manager, and obviously Laurie Mains and Earl Curtin as coaches. So, for me, there was a rich history there, and I just loved it, and probably asked them a lot of questions about their touring days where I'd read books and stuff, playing with Don Clark or whatever, and I could remember, and they probably couldn't remember and couldn't be bothered. I don't know what we bloody did against the north of England, and what do I fucking care, you know? So
It's one of our best impressions we've had.
I'd go bouncing up to Pinetree and say I might need a few extra balls for kicking training. I'd be like, hey, Tree. And he'd be like, "Oh, what do you want, you little fucking wart?" And that was it. But he was fantastic, and you know, he knew he was necessarily no great administrator, but as the manager, if he asked for something, people jumped, and the esteem he was held in, whether it was South Africa or in Europe, France and the UK, was unbelievable. So for me, it was just a dream to have Pinetree there, although it was intimidating because he presented me with my first test jersey, and I've gone into his room to pick up this jersey and put my hand out, and his whole hand basically has swallowed me up, my puny little forearm right up to the elbow. And I'm like, far out. I should be giving this back to him, saying, you get out there, you know. And he was just awesome. So we had a good relationship. But you're right in that I was sitting beside him in the 6-hour court session that we had to try and erase the pain as much as possible of the defeat the day before in the World Cup final. And somebody, you know, there's that really sophisticated game of next where you drink and call next and the next person drinks and on it goes. It's hard to get a handle on, but once you've played it a few times, it becomes like second nature. But somebody had the bright idea, it might have been Frank Bunce, over the far side of the room to punch the bloke in the chin next to him and say next. And so they've gone on. Actually, Pinetree must have been on my right. So they've gone on. So punch. And over the other side of the room, it was sort of in free time at that stage in the court session. The top table wasn't running anything. It was just sort of mix and mingle. But the punches started going around, and we're over this far side having a beer, just a casual beer, and laughing. Oh, look at these idiots over here playing next. Like, whack. These fools play. Hang on. This is going to come round here somewhere. There's... And I've looked beside him and gone, oh my God, Pinetree's beside me. He's gonna give me. Firstly, I'm not going to do anything to the bloke beside me, but Pinetree could probably just give me a flick and I'll be out cold. Anyway, it's finally got round to Pinetree, and I'm thinking, right, don't flinch, do whatever. And all he did was, quick as a flash before anyone could see, he put his hand on my head and punched his hand. He opened it up. I mean, you know, he had these huge hands, but as he was hitting me, he put his hand quickly up. So he took the punch. It still looked like I took. Still looked like I had, took the blow, and on it went. And I made some sort of attempt on whoever was beside me, and but he probably saved my life in that moment. Yeah,
you know how they say once an All Black, always an All Black, which reigns true. But within that All Blacks club, is there there are Pinetrees and Lahores and I guess Richie McCaws. Is there like a hierarchy of All Blacks, if that makes any sense?
No, I don't. Well, I never felt it. At the same time, I was lucky enough to play for a long time and rack up a lot of tests, and so my perspective on it might be different from someone who came in on a tour. Like, for example, we had a lot of guys on that 96 tour to South Africa where the midweek team would often go and play their games without the test team actually coming and watching. So their experience and their perspective of it might be a little bit different. They might have felt almost like second-class citizens. I'm quite sure that some did. I was lucky in that I guess I got given the respect, for whatever reason, of the likes of Fitzy and Zinzambrook and those guys. They were fantastic to me. So my perspective was that, no, you know, you're an All Black, we're all in this together, and some guys are good enough and or fortunate enough to play for longer than others, but there's no distinction in that. But like I say, my perspective on that might be different, and I'm quite sure there'll be guys from that era where it wasn't fully, you know, team on tour. It was the professional era, and the test team got kept to do their preparation, and the midweek team, apart from a couple of test guys who might get put in to just get extra minutes or whatever, they sort of did their own thing as well. And it wasn't a player's choice, it was just the way it was managed. Like, for example, when we toured South Africa in 96, I remember sort of sitting back in the hotel, and the team had gone on the Wednesday or Tuesday to Potchefstroom to play maybe Eastern Transvaal or someone like that. And they thought the experience was incredible because they went on this bus to Potchefstroom, and the ground was bone dry. And about 30 minutes before the game kicked off, the heavens opened and a proper monsoon came through, and the ground filled up like a little paddling pool. So they were running out initially in the game, and the water was sort of that deep on most of the ground, and they kind of, the team there felt that was an incredible experience, but we missed it. We're sitting back in the hotel trying to watch if it was even on TV, you know. So there are probably some players in that who felt like I say, probably second class citizens. Hopefully, no one else in the test team or whatever at the time treated anyone else like second class citizens, but you just never know what some guys' experiences might have been. I mean, I was so caught up with being on the laundry committee at that stage. So in my first year in the All Blacks, I learnt the tradition that 2 newbies get put on as laundry committee, and their job is basically just to collect up all the stinking training gear after each training and make sure the hotel gets it and washes it quickly because, you know, we only got a couple of sets of kit. So I got put on that straight away for the 95 World Cup with Simon Cullen, so the 2 fly halves together. And we found a really inefficient system when we came into this, and we thought, well, you know, we're trying to be professionals here on the field with our training. We're going to be professionals off it with the laundry committee as well. So we went round the whole team and said, with a marker pen, and said, you are going to name your gear. You're going to put your initials on it. We had to tell some guys what initials meant and what way around they went. But you will name your gear. We will happily collect your gear. You don't even have to bring it down to the team room. Put it outside your room half an hour after we get back from training. If your gear's outside your room, we're going to do a sweep of the corridors, and we'll pick it all up and we'll get it, and you can come back and pick it all up, washed, folded at night, you know, 10 o'clock at night, but you have to name it. So, you know, you'd have ZVB for Zinzan Valentine Brook was there, SBTF, Fitzy, of course. So we made sure they all did that sort of, and I'm suddenly thinking, geez, new kid in the team, and I'm demanding that the team captain, Sean Fitzpatrick's painstakingly naming his socks on the little white strip that there was there with a black marker pen. So Simon Cullen and I did that, and we were so good at it that when we toured France at the end of the year, I got reappointed. We got Tane Randall and Justin Marshall for the France and Italy tour at the end of 95. They came on, but I was, I think I was called captain of the laundry committee. The next year, they moved me up and I became CEO of the laundry committee. We got a couple extra guys on, a couple of the newer guys. I think Preston Davis might have been on the laundry committee for the 96 tour, and it became almost a bit of an All Black tradition that I got assigned to the laundry committee every year. So that was probably what my focus was in 96 as well. Tough when you got two groups, the midweek team and the test team. There's a lot of juggling to make sure laundry's done
That's a
correctly.
Good CEO.
Yep.
So alongside the All Black career was some pretty remarkable output for Canterbury and the Crusaders. I think won 5 Super Rugby titles, 3 NBC titles, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. Crusaders had a pretty rough start to Super Rugby, but then along comes Wayne Smith. And I've got some stuff from Wayne that I'm going to read. But first of all, from your perspective, what made Wayne so good? What made Wayne different?
He took us to next level, and I think a lot of times we forget the contribution of Vance Stewart and Ozzie McLean in Canterbury Rugby. You know, when I came in there in 93, things had been tough for Canterbury. I'm not saying I changed that, but it had been tough. You know, you're playing in front of 2,000-3,000 people. Suddenly there was a senior group, and senior group working in conjunction with the coaching staff can be really, really powerful either way. And this was a really, really positive powerful. We had guys like Chris England, Rob Penny, Shane Philpott, Graham Bashop, obviously, who were senior guys. I'm sure I've missed a few, you know, Stu Lowe. Senior guys who were, you know, you knew they were expecting you to put in the effort and search for excellence, but at the same time they were very welcoming, and we had a good bunch of young guys come through, and that was sort of presided over by Vance Stewart and Ozzie McLean, and through that we won that Shield in 94, which gave us, getting back to that as much as I can, but that was kind of a culmination for it and gave us a bit more confidence. Okay, we can foot it with the big boys. And so, you know, there was that belief there. There was a mix of younger and older players, And it got through, and it was a tough season in 96 for the Crusaders. We had a lot of guys, I don't know how other teams operated, but we had a lot of guys still working, full-time jobs. And so even though it was theoretically professional, we'd have our weights sessions would be at 6 a.m. Fortunately, I was injured with my knee, so I didn't have to go to the weight session. But they were training at 6 a.m, doing a day's work, and then training at night. So I'm sure there were a lot of other players in New Zealand in that same boat. But it was a tough season for the Crusaders. I think when Wayne Smith came in, he's always going to enhance anywhere he goes. Anywhere, and I don't think there's any shame in that for the previous coaches. That actually built us up a lot to get to that point of being professional and having a certain pride in our performances. And then Smithy just took it next level because he's got everything. He's got tactical nous, he's got technical knowledge, and he's got a massive heart. So on the personal side, I think that's his best strength, although he's, probably the smartest rugby guy going around, but one of his biggest strengths is his empathy. There's no player could believe that Smithy wants anything other than you to do well. For you first and foremost, for the team obviously who will benefit from that. But that's it, he wants you to do well, and he wants to put everything in place so that you can do that. And if it's understanding or if it's specific skills or whatever it is, then that's what he'll move mountains for you.
He's been incredibly generous to us with his time. Just in this we had him on the podcast, and we've gone back to him for a bunch of guests, and he always gives us such detailed responses. And he's actually emailed. We asked, can you tell us some stuff about Mehrts? Like what made him special? And he's given us a 7-point list, which I'm actually going to read out the whole thing.
Only 7.
So get comfortable. Yeah. So he said, here are some key points around Mehrts. Number 1, genius on and off the field. Number 2, understood the game better than I did, and I was the coach. Number 3, great support to me through some tough times when the Crusaders campaign wasn't looking too good after 5 rounds in 1998. I started looking for a new job as the word was that I'd be cut at the end of the season. Even Larry the Lamb was writing a resignation letter. Haha. Then we came right, often on the back of Toddy's leadership and Mehrts' brilliance. Point 4, we went through years together that weren't always easy, not always successful, but working closely with Andrew was helping me build a career. He had diverse ideas and often solutions that were different to what I would have done. I learned much off him, Marshy, Toddy, Razor, etc. in those years, and they helped shape my career. Number 5. In 1999, we lost a game in Cape Town. The next day, Marshy and Mehrts came to see me in my hotel room. Their message was that the team was taking the empowerment for granted. I loved giving the players responsibility and the opportunity to rise to their own challenges. Their view was that I needed to take over again and make some hard decisions, and they were right. My first hard decision was to drop them both for the next game versus the Bulls at Loftus Versfeld. They hadn't played well. Mehrts had an injury and Leon needed to start along with Aaron Flynn. It didn't go down that well, especially with Marshy. 6. The Bulls game is now legendary. Marsh and Mehrts came on in the second half. Mehrts dropped a goal on full time to win the game. That win was crucial and ultimately led us to winning the Super 12 back-to-back. And 7, last point, the game will always be remembered for Mehrts running around the field after the final whistle, giving the finger to the crowd. Mehrts can tell you the real story, but the boys that night, over a beer or two, tried to convince me that Mehrts was giving the finger to me. I wouldn't have minded if he was. Mehrts, more than anyone else in my early coaching career, helped shape my growth and my career. I'm forever grateful, and I think he knows that. I hope. If he doesn't, he does now. Smithy.
Well, I think he's taken a little bit of license there. I'd love to. I mean, that's humbling, but I don't doubt what he says is right, but I wouldn't have ever seen that I would have an influence on a coach other than the fact that you enjoy working together. You I guess, find hopefully the same values, the same desire. Like I say, that I don't remember it like that because I don't presume to have had an influence on Smithy because I think he's absolutely unbelievable. I'd first encountered him with sort of under 18s and under 19s down in Canterbury, and he was working along a lot of coaching of the development pathways, teaching as well, I think, at the same time. And he's just always been an unbelievable coach in every respect. And he's always a coach who's wanted to he's got the strength of his conviction, but at the same time, he always wants to get better. He always wants to see if he can improve. He always wants to look for different influences and different thoughts. I mean, we had a couple of people in our Crusaders setup that I didn't, not players, but that I didn't get on with. And one time I was whinging to Smithy about how I didn't think they were a good rugby person or whatever. And Smithy said, look, the important thing is they bring a different way of thinking. And if we're all thinking the exact same way and we're never questioning that, we'll never grow, we'll never probably improve outside of a fairly limited range. And he said, so I appreciate having those sort of differing views. So he's always a guy who's wanted to do everything he can, leave no stone unturned to better himself, to help him better other players and the team.
There's a postscript, and I think based on your reaction to what I read before, it might come as a surprise to you, but we'll see how we go. P.S. One last point. At the end of each campaign, I would visit players' homes and do a review of the season, a keep, stop, start doing analysis. Almost every player I interviewed mentioned Mehrts as a prime reason for our success. How good is that? How good is that?
Well, kind of me from the stomach rumbling, I guess. Yeah. Sorry again. Oh, look, we had a...
But no question is, like, did you understand the influence you were having? Like,
no, I probably was more keen to deny having that kind of an influence. I mean, I was quite happy on the field being the boss or calling the shots as much as possible, just to have a clear direction. I didn't feel like I was making better decisions than anyone else, but I just felt at 10, that's kind of part of your role, and that for right or wrong, players around you want to have an idea of where you're going, and so you can all get in. And even if it's wrong, like they used to say in some ways, there's no wrong decision, because if we all go there together, we'll make the best of it, you know what? And that's more important than finding the perfect decision each time. So I probably was always denying myself. And look, this didn't help later on probably in my career, where I didn't take my role as a leader maybe seriously enough in the team. I felt because I didn't want to be a leader, I didn't want to be seen as a leader, I didn't want to be seen to be putting myself up there as a leader. So I would be really welcoming, I think. I'd like to think that young guys coming into the team would always find me really good to them and really welcoming, really make them feel comfortable in the environment, you're worthy for being here and everything like that. But I don't think if they were coming into the environment and looking at the seasoned professionals to try to get an idea of an example being set for them, I don't think I was a good example like that, whether it was the diligence around training or that sort of thing, Some of the things when you get, through a few years in your career, you get a much lower level of tolerance to certain things. So if we were going out and doing functions and stuff like that, I would not inevitably be the one complaining about that most of all. Marshy was good at times at doing that too, but so I didn't want to set myself up as a leader, but I think subsequently I've realised that that wasn't really my choice. If you're an experienced player in that environment and you've got young players coming in, they're going to be looking at you. They're going to be looking at you for inspiration and for example. And I don't think I set that for guys. But, we had some good campaigns where, like I say, I was comfortable on the field being the guy calling the shots and sort of getting the feel for the game. And through that, if players felt that I was giving them clarity with what I wanted from them and stuff like that, then great. But at the end of the day, I just saw it as being part of my role.
Mm. On what he said about the fingers thing, did the lads really make him believe that you were doing it to him?
Look, I don't know, because I went to him straight after the game, and my favourite image of that whole thing is Norm Berryman when he got to me and he was grinning so much, and I remember thinking, he doesn't actually know whether or not the ball went over. He loves the fact that I just pulled the fingers, So I was so glad that my mate was the first one to me, because I spent a lot of fantastic times with Normie B. But after the game, I went to Smithy in the change rooms and I said, I think I need to come to the press conference with you after the game. Is that okay? And he said, why? And I said, I did something I'm probably not proud of. You might want to watch the footage. And he went to the end of the corner of the change room, got the footage up on one of the computers and looked at it and said, yep, I think you're right. You better come in. So we went to the press conference. We were sitting there, and of course, straight away they were asking me about it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm trying to be conciliatory and, look, I'm really sorry. It was just exuberance and I don't know where it came from and I love playing at Pretoria and I think you're passionate rugby people, blah, blah, blah. And they asked Ruben Kruger, who was again, one of those guys diametrically opposed to me, tough, uncompromising, hard man, guy you can rely on to make the tackle. And they asked him, what did he think of this cheeky Crusaders bugger pulling the fingers to his home crowd? And he had a little moment. He sort of looked over and smirked and he turned back around and he said, I probably would have done the same thing. So he just diffused it, which was really, really nice. Smithy was a bit worried that night that there may be trouble if we went out. I mean, Pretoria and Bulls supporters are naturally really abrasive. They're very physical, very passionate, and they're into you the whole time you get to the ground. As soon as you get to the ground, because it used to be that you didn't go under the stand, you used to get dropped off at the end of the field, have to walk around the front of all the boxes. They've been there since 11 in the morning eating steak and drinking Kosalog, and they're all shouting out.
South African. It's really good.
They love it. We're going to smash you today. We're going to scrum you to death and all that sort of stuff. They're right into you. But if you happen to beat them at Pretoria, they are magnanimous. Properly give you your dues. They just love rugby, but they're really into you before the game and the whole course of the game. So, Smithy was thinking, okay, maybe there could be a little bit of trouble after the fingers. I managed to somehow strong arm, this is the wrong term, but I managed to coerce Ron Cribb into coming out with me. And we went out, just had a beer, and we found people to be absolutely fantastic about it. I was, I guess, conscious to be a little bit whatever, contrite or whatever, but people were talking about it. They said, look, you guys won. It was a great game. I don't want to keep doing the South African accent.
I saw the little sign. I thought, he's got it in his locker.
I thought this doesn't feel realistic. But no, they were fine. And I actually I realised after a little while that they were actually kind of proud of me because it was the first time they'd seen me show some cojones on the field. Yeah. They'd suddenly seen a bit of spine. So, it was an important moment for us. We'd had a tough tour. And speaking of Normie B, one of the moments that stood out to me was of my whole time in the Crusaders was after that Cape Town loss that Smithy talked about, and I had a vicious injury. I'd been in the gym faffing around trying to look like I was doing something, but normally I was just talking to everyone. And I was unloading a squat rack with a 20 kg, meanwhile chatting, and I didn't realise there was a 5 kg in front of it. So as I've pulled the 20 off, the 5's just dropped straight on my toe. And again, I've got a very low pain threshold, so it was excruciating. And I've had to go and get the blood release from under the nail, and I got jabs for trainings and stuff, and I hate needles. And the jab, the anaesthetic would inevitably run out. So throughout the course of the game, get into the second half and it would run out and I'm hobbling around because I'm a bit of a pussy. So that's what happened in Pretoria as well. But eventually when I got on after they let us on with Marshy, but Normie B had got up after that Stormers loss in Cape Town. And in our not court session more, it was just in our team room. We had a bit of a sort of a powwow, and Normie B got up and said, we're kidding ourselves. I think we're talking a good game. We're talking about how everyone, loves one another, there for one another. We can be honest with one another. He said, we're not actually being honest with one another. We're not holding one another to high enough standards. We're not telling one another, hey, I need you to be better there. I need you to be present on defence. I need more talk from you, whatever. He said, we're not saying that to one another. We're talking how honest we are, not being honest. And that was probably one of the pivotal moments for the Crusaders.
Eventually, your time with New Zealand Rugby kind of comes to a conclusion. Not before a bloke by the name of Dan Carter sort of comes on to take the mantle. And in researching this, it's crazy, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but second highest point score of all time for the All Blacks. And we only kind of focus now on Dan Carter. Your contribution was incredible.
I'm more than comfortable focusing on Dan Carter because I think he's genuinely the best. I know in very different roles, but the best rugby player of all time, one of the most natural sports people you'll ever meet, one of the most humble guys you'll ever meet as well. And I think I consider myself lucky to have played alongside him and Richie McCaw, I think as two of our two greatest modern players. But DC, there's no shame for me in being second or whatever there. I'm more than happy with. I got 967 more points than I thought I would, So I was lucky to stick around a long time. Probably lucky that someone like Carter didn't arrive earlier, and when he did arrive, he was fantastic, despite the fact that when I was at Old Boys, I got kicked back to Old Boys a couple of times throughout my Crusaders career. One of those times I was training with the seniors and a couple of young whippersnappers came over and said, "Oh, what do you think about Dan Carter, who's going to take your jersey?" And I said, "Oh, which one is he?" And they pointed over to this, whether it was under 21s or senior B team training, and they pointed at someone. I looked at the wrong guy. I didn't see Carter. I saw this other bloke, and I was like, I sort of watched for a little bit. Didn't think too much of him. I was like, yeah, awesome fellas. Like, I walk away going, hey, no worries there. And it turns out just fantastic. I was lucky that he was so talented because, for maybe 2 or 3 seasons, he could just plug in at any position in the back line where we felt we might be weakest. So if we weren't necessarily weakest at 10, somehow they didn't think so, I don't know, but I'd stay at 10 and he'd be at 12 or 13 or winger, and just phenomenal, which I think is also good for a 10 as well. When you're young and you've got speed and kind of audacity and stuff, playing in another position is really good, particularly at fullback. I think maybe that was good for him as well, playing in all the different positions. But he was a guy who was always going to be the best, I think. And
am I right in thinking that you leave New Zealand, your career kind of has a renaissance with Harlequins, and you've referenced Harlequins before about playing for them here in New Zealand, and they'd just been relegated, I think, and playing at like boutique, maybe that's being generous.
Yeah, it is.
But playing at some English, not so prominent English stadiums. But was that like a refreshing move in your rugby career?
It was awesome. I loved it. I mean, I was more than satisfied with what I'd been able to do. Obviously disappointed about certain things with the All Blacks, the 2 World Cups I'd been involved in and losing to South Africa and France. But I was really satisfied and considered myself very lucky to have played as much as I did over here. And then overseas, I think firstly it was enjoyable when you're just playing for one team for the whole season, like you're back playing club rugby, so you don't have to think about, okay, will I get selected for this team and then I go in a different team with different structure, different setup, all that sort of stuff. You can look at your whole season and plan it. So I think that's quite good mentally for New Zealand players going and playing overseas. Plus I found what I thought was a certain anonymity in the UK. Now that was blown out
in Rotherham.
That was blown out on the first day because I'm in Richmond and I wanted to go and get a cell phone contract, and I've walked into this whatever shop it was, and I've walked up to the counter and it was a guy who looked very what the English call Asian, so Indian or Sri Lankan, Pakistani, was working in there, and I've just said, "G'day," and he looked at me and he said, "Are you the rugby player?" I said, "What? Are you joking?" sort of thing, like almost like, I'd expect you to know cricket, but maybe not, And he goes, "I'm Chris, I'm from Auckland." Anyway, it's kind of like, oh, jeez, just my luck. But I really enjoyed that. Harlequins I'd signed for, I knew they had a long proud history and heritage. So I was excited to go to London for a new experience and B, to play for a club like that over there. Then they got relegated and they rang me up and they said, "Oh, we've been relegated. You probably saw that and you probably don't want to come and play for us in second division." And I said, "Well, I don't know if you've seen me play lately, but second division is certainly not beneath me." So I've got my heart set on joining the club and being there in London. And we had a wonderful time. And Harlequins had previously had the perception was that they were, the brandy swilling, cigar smoking hoity-toities of the rugby scene. And I can see why they got that to an extent. But that second division year when we went out and our first game was played at Solihull, just out of Birmingham, we played against the Mehrtens Bees. And our supporters jumped on 3 or 4 buses. They came up, they drank, pints out of plastic cups, standing on gravel around the outside of the ground with the locals, just engaged. The next week we played at Otley and we went to places like Rotherham, Newbury, all these sort of places that aren't big rugby names outside of the UK from the Premiership. And our supporters did that every week. And I think it was actually a really good PR exercise for the Harlequins club that we engaged with every club against whom we played, and they enjoyed it. I mean, and one of my great experiences was the second week we played at Otley in Yorkshire, and they'd grown the grass over the summer, knowing they were playing us second round, and the grass was sort of this high. But I was about to run out for the warm-up. All the rest of the team had gone out. I was always, minimise my effort, but I was the last one out for the warm-up. As I was running out to get out there onto the field, basically got grabbed by the ear by these couple of Yorkshiremen and said, "Come on here."
It's good. Keep going. You've got to.
They're like, "Come on here, come and look on wall."
Yeah.
And so I got in there, and the wall of the club rooms at Otley is this huge big mural which commemorates when the north of England beat the All Blacks. I think it might have been the 73 tour. And they were like, the back row was awesome. Roger Otley, blah, 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 blah. They didn't get selected for England the next week. We lost to the All Blacks, but we beat them. So, I've got dragged in there and just being shown some of the All Black history and how people revere that connection, but obviously having beaten the All Blacks on tour. So, this experience of playing in second division for me with Harlequins was fantastic. We had a good year. We always should. I mean, you get a £2 million parachute or whatever it was, so you should always bounce back up. But it was a great experience for the club, and I enjoyed it because I got to go around places that probably I would identify with a lot more, small country towns and rural communities, and had a fantastic time.
In these years, the twilight years of your career, how much are you thinking about what's coming next? Because you dipped your toe into coaching at one point. Did you think that was a path you'd go down?
No, I probably never wanted to chase rugby all my life. I wanted to, eventually have family and concentrate on my family and weekends. I didn't want my weekends to be tied up with rugby. So I probably didn't think enough about it at that stage. I think they look after players a lot better now in terms of getting some genuine skills. I was lucky when I got out of rugby eventually that through Rugby Connections, through Phil Kearns in Sydney, I was able to get a job in financial services. He was able to tip me into or grandfather me into a whole bunch of really influential relationships in financial services, which has stood me in really, really good stead. So I was very, very lucky. But I think at the time I probably didn't think about it as much as I should have. To an extent, you're thinking, it's just going to keep on going and going. And I guess particularly at 10, where you don't have to, a lot of your role is around communication, organisation, or it can be, and goal kicking. So long as you're still doing that, you're satisfying a number of core roles. But I didn't probably anticipate it well enough then. And I was lucky that, as I say, in those roles as a 10 and a goal kicker, you can still pick up contracts. And I ended up, going from Harlequins after we had one season in the English Premiership. They said to me, and quite nicely, look, Dean Richards sat me down and said, look, you've got one of two foreign spots. We need someone who's, you just missed 9 weeks at the start of the season getting your knee cleaned up and stuff. We need a younger player who's, going to be 5 years with us to take up one of those spots, not you. So go with our blessing, but we're not re-signing it. And I was like, look, not a problem. Ended up at Toulon, had a season there, went to racing in Paris for a couple of seasons, then finished with a third division season at Béziers where we went up. I had I was lucky, had a most extraordinary experience post All Blacks, for a kid from Tuahiwi to live in London, to live in 3 different parts of France, including Paris, and the south of France. It was just unbelievable. And so I probably prolonged it, given how much effort I didn't put into training and keeping myself in really good nick. I went downhill pretty quickly. The game had passed me by in terms of speed and physicality. I was still kicking some goals and whatnot and still bringing a bit of experience to the mix, but I was kind of lucky. I probably overplayed my usefulness really, but very thankful to be able to do so.
Did you find the transition hard from being a full-time rugby player to being in financial services?
I was probably lucky with my experience, but I think it can be really, really difficult. Like I say, Kearnsy helped me massively in Sydney. At the same time, I do think that has got to be managed really well, because people look at sport, particularly rugby players, and think, okay, they're confident, they're motivated, they want to achieve, which are all true, but they've been doing that in quite a structured environment where they're getting, and also they're very good at, we think, taking constructive criticism, taking feedback, positive and negative, being very, very self-aware about your performance. But like I say, you're doing that in a really kind of a structured environment. And I think getting into sort of a corporate job or normal sort of employment, I think there's got to be a big effort to make sure to get the best out of a player, that you're putting a lot of structure around feedback and that sort of thing. You know, what does success look like? Now, if you're working with a product that, like I was a couple of times, where, you know, you might have a 3 to 5 year lead time of talking to people, finding out their pain points before finally getting a chance to pitch for it, then it's really hard to judge how am I doing when you've got that long a lead time. Whereas as a rugby player, you're getting feedback daily and weekly on, you know, whether it's in the gym, this is how well you went, this is how your preparation was, this is how your performance was, constant. So I think, you know, while I was lucky to walk into a lot of relationships, I think, you know, we can manage, if we manage players, probably from any sport coming out, and particularly from individual disciplines as well, they've got certain skills that they think are just everyone's got, which isn't necessarily the case. But they're often too kind of humble to say, hey, you know, we need more of this or whatever. So I think if you've got good employers who understand this is how we get the best out of them and explain clearly, these are the attributes you have. We know you don't know everything and you're still learning and you're very happy to go back to zero and climb the corporate ladder from zero, but these are the skills you do have. These are what we want to apply to the people around you in this environment and stuff like that. And this is how we're going to do it. And this is how we give you constant feedback. I think that the transition would be a lot easier.
And you also step into punditry and sort of speaking gigs like we spoke about. Does that ever get, and I know we've covered a lot of the stories, you're sort of the greatest hits in this episode, but do you ever get sick or tired of that, of just going through the same thing?
Totally, because I think, you know, when you've said a couple of stories 2 or 3 times and you've heard it yourself, you end up sort of boring yourself. And I think you can get a little bit self-conscious if you're not feeling like you're delivering it with energy. Even if it's people hearing it for the first time, you've got to try and deliver it with some enthusiasm. And sometimes I think probably you almost feel like a bit of a fake because you're trying to sound like it's on the spur of the moment and you've just suddenly thought of the story and telling it like you're telling a joke with some energy, and you probably feel like a bit of a fake if you've just told the same thing 2.5 hours ago.
And then do you always get really good feedback? You'll be like, I don't know if that landed, and then be like, that was amazing.
Yeah, like you can have sometimes where people seem really, really happy, but you felt, oh my God, that wasn't great. I've had a couple of stinkers too, to be honest. Normally I have stinkers when I'm kind of left there to just basically deliver a presentation, and I'm not good at structuring that. I'm a lot better with question and answer and stuff and working conversationally. I may still not be great, but I'm better than doing a presentation. I've done a couple of ones. I mean, I did one a couple of years ago for out in Perth for a former teammate who's in a different industry now, and I'm almost embarrassed to look at him again now. You know, I think it was a Tuesday night. They were in this first or second night of a week-long conference and stuff like that, and it wasn't quite the drunk crowd or the raucous crowd, and I think I badly missed, and I'm still embarrassed about that. I've got some encouragement from proper professional presenters who I've talked to have said, oh yeah, that happens. Yeah, you have a stinker. We had this one where straight away it fell on deaf ears or whatever, but still you feel acutely embarrassed. I just feel lucky. I mean, I love going to, I love going to rugby clubs and doing Q&A. I love, I guess, bringing my experience to other club people and club players, because I genuinely could have been anyone who played club rugby and, got a few lucky breaks, was in the right place at the right time, whatever it was. So I feel my story feels like it could be every man's story. And so, and also trying to bring alive the All Blacks experience that's actually in the context the same as a club rugby team, and I know the All Blacks work really hard on having that kind of grounding with their current players who don't get the opportunity to experience, club culture as we've experienced. And so that's why they have the club night. But I like to think that, the experiences you have, the special little experiences that you have in the All Blacks will be around people and teammates and moments. And that happens no matter what the context of the rugby, whether it's international, under 13 Bs or whatever the heck it is,
I think that's why you're so relatable in that context, is because you guys who played in that era were the last generation of guys that they were tangible and you could see them in the rugby club and they would pull on the club jersey, and then you've got strong opinions because you weren't, with respect to what we see now, you didn't have to be as filtered in the media because there weren't cameras and phones and everything was kind of there for show. So I think that's why, you're a really uniquely positioned to have strong opinions in public spaces and in punditry as well, and like with your keynotes and stuff. I think we were lucky that we were in an environment where you're less guarded, and I can see why players are these days. You know what I mean? It's certainly not judging them, but I was lucky enough to go through that stage of playing your first senior club game and going in and having a court session in the freezing cold changing rooms at Eyre Street in Christchurch, the old boys club rooms, and a legend like Kenny Pope, who was presiding, who actually played with my father as well, I think in the late 70s, early 80s, and was still playing when I came along. So, and he was running the court session and that sort of thing, and you learn in those court sessions to shut the hell up, so that's the basic premise of a court session. Speak when spoken to. So, I love that experience. I know it's difficult for professional players these days to genuinely engage at club level, and some are better at doing it than others. But I can see why it's difficult. I'd love to see a world where the professional competitions are shorter and there are defined windows. Hopefully we get to a global season, because I'd love to see, if possible, more engagement. I don't think professional players who are playing internationals could really play club rugby in terms of with the training they've got. Like, their bodies are much more of a weapon, and I think it can in some situations be dangerous having those players, but I think still having some involvement with the club, being, like you say, tangible, I think is still important. It's always been a big part of our game, and I just hope it doesn't. I can see why it's getting eroded, but it's without anyone really making a conscious decision to erode it, but it is, and it'd be nice to see it come back a little bit.
Yeah, Shay's so right. You're so relatable and normal, but does it feel like, reflecting on everything we've talked about and this incredible journey you've been on, does it feel a bit surreal? Like, we talk about pinch yourself moments right back at the start. Like, it's just a hell of a life. Right?
I still have them. Like, seriously, I was lucky enough to go to South Africa for 2 weeks to watch the All Blacks games there. And just when you're running into some of the former players, and whether it's Jean de Villiers or Brian Habana and those sort of guys who are, a younger generation from me, but just to kind of be alongside them and be like, okay, well, with a couple of former luminary World Cup winning Springboks here, I feel like I should be getting their autograph as well, It's I don't know, I can't stress it enough. I'm just the ordinary bloke who, got a lucky lotto win, not the lotto win in the World Cup final in '95, unfortunately, but that's what it is. I'm thankful. At heart, I'm still a club player. I'm still a Kaiapoi junior rugby player. We won in under-13s against Oxford, 12-10. 14-12. We got one conversion, 3 tries apiece and one conversion. I can still remember it going through.
Do you remember all those sort of stats?
I remember that better than some of the maybe test matches. I remember when I first got in the All Blacks, and I was living and breathing test matches, and I'd say to some of the older guys, remember when you played against England and the whatever, and don't you remember that? And they were like, not sure. And I'm like, whoa, why can't you remember that? By the end of kind of my career, I'd had young guys sort of reminiscing about some of the games that I'd played, and I remember thinking, I can't remember that moment specifically. Like I say, there are just moments more that stand out more so than kind of like the scoring moments or whatever. I remember one of my most vivid memories is in Brisbane, got myself into a gap when Frank Bunce put me into a gap at the end of that game in '96, and I'm in clear space, and it didn't happen to me a lot in international rugby, and the crowd's gone mad, and I almost dropped the ball because I'm, oh my God, I'm in space, what do I do? And I've looked outside me, and Christian Cullen and Jeff Wilson were running basically in step. They just like gazelles, got there straight away. I remember thinking at the time, no kidding, I've got the ball in my hands. I remember thinking, wow, what a beautiful image. This is something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. Yeah. Followed quickly by the thought, you've got to get it to one of these guys. Like, get that pass, don't throw it forward. But they were the little moments. And like I say, they can happen, whatever, your moments throughout your whole rugby, whether it's under 12 Cs or whether it's first 15 or third 15 or club, fourth division, whatever.
Can I just latch onto a name there? Because he's quite prominent at the moment, and I'm a big Celebrity Treasure Island fan. So Cully's on Celebrity Treasure Island at the moment, and I've been watching it with Doc Brown, my partner, and like having these flashbacks of like what a player he was. Did we underappreciate how good he was?
He was phenomenal. I think in this day and age of the speed of the game and all these amazing players, amazing athletes, it's probably easy to forget, because what he was doing, you see a lot of similar stuff, whether it's Will Jordan, but I guess what we don't appreciate so much is how much probably above other people of the time he was, same as Jonah. And Jonah, we remember the strength, but we sometimes forget the speed of the guy as well. But Cully was just, something else. And in that, he was, he'll be the first to admit he wasn't the perfect fullback, but his speed got him out of, I remember playing against the Hurricanes and thinking, right, we've got some space here. I'll be able to try and move him left and right. And he'd get there. And you're like, far out. You weren't in position to get that. You got no right to get that ball. So, but he was phenomenal. His ability to change direction without losing any speed was unparalleled. And then throwing himself into the middle of forwards or whatever and clobbering them and taking them backwards was just ridiculous. For a guy who seemed to be asleep his entire life, I thought he was unbelievable. There are a couple of moments when I remember with Cully, like when he was playing at centre, I think it might have been the World Cup in '99 against England, he'd overrun a ball. He wanted the ball, he'd overrun it, I'd thrown it back inside. So in my head, I knew he was out of the game. He wasn't available. And he was sort of coming back to get into play. And the ball's come out quickly. I got one of the rare breaks of my career because there was just a big hole opened up. And I've gone through and I'm still thinking, okay, Cully's nowhere near because he was getting back in position. I've looked around. He's right there on my shoulder. Sniffed the break. Bang, off the mark. So quick. And I just remember, oh, thank God. Gave it to him. And those sort of little moments of players like that, I again, still pinching myself the experiences I had.
I'm going to let you go soon. I've just got a couple of little bits left on my list. One of them is kind of a loop back to the start, and it's about the twins and family and, how you're thinking, like the next 5 years are going to be just so full on, right? Like twins, there's just so much there. Like how are you thinking about the short term and the long term and the future?
Well, firstly, there's probably not enough rugby tours for me to get away and work on for the next 5 years. Look, I'm in a situation at the moment where I sort of, had a couple of relationships disintegrate pretty spectacularly over my last 20, 25 years. If I'm trying to advise, if you're talking about financial advice, I'm trying to advise young sports people, choose wisely and get yourself set up so you're well protected. There's no shame in that because, things can go south pretty quickly, pretty easily. So I'm over in Paris. I know I've got to keep my head down, keep working, a couple of financial services relationships and stuff like that. Hopefully looks like there might be a couple of rugby projects as well where I don't want to get into coaching, but some sort of involvement in rugby at a franchise or a professional club level could be an opportunity. So I'm hoping to do that. So, it's just, I guess, head down, working hard. I've got 3 kids in Christchurch, ranging from 24 down to 15. So continuing to try and do everything I can to, help them, look after them. It's going to be a juggling act for the next 5 years. And I think just working hard and appreciating the moments, this time in France is probably a better environment. When I was in France last time, and I'm certainly not blaming here, but our relationship wasn't wonderful, and probably it wasn't the experience for either of us or anyone in the family that it could have been. So pretty intent this time on it being a better experience, and doing more to support a growing number of 2 stepdaughters, the twins, 3 children in Christchurch. So it's properly modern family, and just want to be working hard to try and support them in whatever they want to do. And my second son, George, in Christchurch, he's a skier and wants to potentially get into ski instructing. If I can help him get access into the French ski scene or whatever, I want to be able to do that. My daughter Ivy in Christchurch, she'd love to do, time overseas as well. They've both got a connection to France because they're born there. So really my motivation is just doing what you can for family. And at the same time trying to, I guess, support my mum, who's been absolutely incredible through the loss of, her life partner. And they'll be the first to say they weren't perfect by any stretch, but they were a pretty strong couple. And so, trying to support her as much as possible and get as much time back over here and get back to my heritage over here as well as much as I can. It's, spiritually pretty fulfilling being back. I haven't got to Tuahiwi this time. It's not really my literal tūranga waiwai, but, it's where my first memories were forged and stuff. So I guess just trying to have some balance and at the same time work hard to support my my whānau.
Well, we're glad you stopped in because you're just the perfect guest. Like you are, and I know it's hard to take compliments, but just, nostalgic, legendary, all of the words that go with it, but such a good articulate storyteller too.
Hopefully, I don't know. I mean, I came from fairly inauspicious background in terms of getting through and playing international rugby. If I can give any other normal kids out there hope that things can happen, things can be achieved, you do need a certain amount of luck. And New Zealand rugby history is scattered with players who were much more worthy than me of being in the All Blacks who didn't make it there. But one of the great comments I remember from in the Crusaders days was Todd Blackadder, and we just had the team naming from the All Blacks. So we had some guys who were elated, some guys who were deflated and all that sort of stuff, but we had a game to play. And Toddy said to us in that context, he just said, you don't have to be an All Black to play like one. And that was something I took out as well. So it's just, pride in your own personal performance and that sort of thing, So hopefully I can be some encouragement to kids to say, look, you don't always have to come through with the glittering lights from age 12, 13, 14. So, the door's still open for you. So I really hope it is for kids.
Been an absolute pleasure, Mehrts. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers, guys.